Good morning. My name is Olivier Silla. I would like to welcome you together with my colleagues from CINEA and DG Energy to this virtual info day relating to the CEF Energy 2025 call. I'll start perhaps with very practical points. This session is recorded, meaning that you will be able to access it afterwards on the call webpage. Second, on that very same call webpage, you can already find a set of Q&As. So if you do not find your answers to your questions on this Q&As set, you can also ask questions during this session. You find at the bottom of the slide a QR code. This is a Slido link, so you can click on it and enter your questions. Our colleagues will answer your questions at the end of the morning, at the end of this session. So this morning, we will, of course, start by presenting you the policy aspects, the policy context of this call for proposals. We will then take you through the key elements of our model grant agreement, very important. We will then look into admissibility and eligibility criteria. We will look into the award criteria, how we select the projects, and after a break, you will receive some tips on how to best prepare a successful proposal. We will also take you through cost and budget management. We will have a colleague giving you some best advice on how to present your business plan. And as I was mentioning, we will end the morning with a Q&A session, answering the questions that you will have sent us through the Slido system. Last but not least, you can find also a link to a video which will address more specifically how to interface with the e-grant application, because as you know, your application has to be entered into our e-grant system. Now, just a few words of introduction. CEF Energy is a very successful program since 2014. We have allocated about 8.1 billion in EU contribution to different projects. We are speaking about 56 actions for works and about 168 actions for studies. This relates to electricity transmission. It relates to gas networks, even if this is now in a phasing out moment. It relates now, of course, this is a new element to hydrogen and electrolyzers. It relates to smart grids, to CO2 networks, and of course also to cross-border cooperation in the field of renewable energy, even if this last element is not covered by the present call for proposal. Where do we stand in relation with our budget? So as you can see, the light blue part corresponds basically to what has already been allocated to grant agreements, so about 60%. Today we are speaking about the green part, so the budget for this 2025 call, which is 600 million. Let me also remind that it is an indicative budget, so we can go below or above. We have a certain margin depending on the quality and the number of proposals that will be received. And this also means that for the coming years, we still have the possibility to allocate in the future call for proposals about 30% of the budget, so about 1.75 billion. Quick go through the call timeline. So, of course, the most important date for you is the 16th of September, the deadline for submitting your applications. Please, please, please do not wait for that date to enter your application. Take a bit of a buffer. Of course, after that, we will enter the evaluation phase, culminating to the CEF Coordination Committee in January, and you will hear from us through the system by the end of January, early February, both for applicants who are successful and the applicants who are not successful. You will be notified, and after that, as usual, we launch the grant agreement preparations with the successful applicants, with the aim to sign the grant agreements and then to also pay the pre-financing towards mid-2026. Quickly on the steps concerning the evaluation and selection process. So, of course, we start by checking the admissibility and eligibility criteria. This is done in-house by CINEA. Afterwards, we rely on external experts. Every proposal is looked at by 3 external experts, having really a knowledge of the specific sector you are applying for, and they do both an individual assessment and then a consensus assessment of the proposal, and on that basis then the internal committee composed and chaired by DG Energy is looking again at the proposal for specific criteria and decides on the ranking. This is then submitted to a formal selection process with, of course, inter-service consultation of the services of the Commission. And as I was mentioning, after the positive opinion of the CEF Coordination Committee, the Commission adopts the selection decision, and this is the basis for us at CINEA then to kickstart the grant agreement preparation. So you will receive, as a result of the evaluation, an evaluation result letter. So this is for all the proposals. This will be through the participant portal. So every interaction goes through the participant portal, and the successful proposals will be invited for grant preparation. Clearly, at this stage, just a caveat, this invitation will not constitute a formal commitment for funding because, of course, we have also to go through a certain number of steps that will be explained on formal checks like the legal entity validation, the financial capacity, and so on. Clearly, our process also entails for you the right of reviews at different steps. So clearly, when you will receive the evaluation result letter, this will also clearly inform you about the possibility to ask for a review. So with that, I would like then to immediately hand over the floor to my colleague, Joachim Balke, who is the Head of Unit Infrastructure and Regional Cooperation in DG Energy. And Joachim will take us through the key policy aspects of this call for proposal. Joachim.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Olivier, for the introduction. And indeed, from my side, just a very brief couple of words really on the policy context in which this CEF call takes place. You will be all thoroughly familiar with it, so I will keep this part of the info day very short. As you will all know, financial support through the Connecting Europe facility is intrinsically linked to our infrastructure policy as defined in the 10E regulation, because the eligibility for this CEF funding is limited to PCIs and PMIs which are selected through the process as established by the 10E regulation. If we just look briefly at the policy environment for this, I think what we can say in very few words is that the importance of this 10E policy, the importance of rolling out our energy infrastructure, our grid infrastructure, has been brought to the fore even more strongly recently by all our policy documents, and I will just point to the Affordable Energy Action Plan that has been adopted earlier this year, which clearly points to the importance of accelerating our infrastructure build-out in order to achieve a cost-efficient energy transition. So it's clear that more has to be done in this regard, and I will come back to this in the very end. Sorry, I jumped over one slide. As I said, eligibility for CEF funding is determined by the 10E regulation and by the scope of our PCI PMI categories. I will just recall very briefly that the 10E regulation was revised, and the current 10E regulation that entered into force in 2022 determines the eligibility for the PCI and PMI projects as relevant for this call. The main change in scope that came into force through this new regulation is that natural gas infrastructure is no more eligible, whereas we now have new categories in the area of hydrogen, and we do of course have quite a number of PCIs and PMIs in this area, which are eligible to apply for funding. One other important novelty of this new TENI regulation was the inclusion of projects with third countries, the so-called projects of mutual interest, of which we also have a few on our current PCI-PMI list. Now, to recap briefly, and this is probably the most important part of the presentation, that in our TENI framework, once a project is selected on the PCI-PMI list, it benefits from a number of advantages, it has a number of benefits, and funding through the EU, through the Connecting Europe facility, is only the last resort in this context. So as you can see here, there are basically three types of benefits that PCIs have. The first is related to accelerated permit granting. So PCIs and PMIs have a special status in this regard. The second concerns regulatory measures, such as, for example, the possibility to benefit from specific incentives and the possibility to have a cross-border cost allocation. And then, as a last set of benefits, indeed, there is the possibility, the eligibility to apply for funding under the Connecting Europe facility. This slide, I think, underlines the same message. So, in a sense, there is a cascade of mechanisms to enable the implementation of such PCIs and PMIs. And once again, I mentioned these instruments, cross-border cost allocation, regulatory incentive, financial instruments can also be applied. The EIB supports many of those projects. And then there is, and I emphasize this is the last resort option, the possibility to apply for grants for studies and then for grants for works, ultimately for the subset of projects which otherwise would not be realized. So important to keep this hierarchy, let's say, of instruments in mind. Then just very briefly, a few words as an overview over the projects that we have on the current list and which are eligible for funding. To apply for funding, there are 85 electricity projects, so this is the biggest category. This includes storage projects and also a number of smart grid projects. Offshore projects are now also a specific focus, and there are specific corridors, regional groups to identify offshore projects, because this is, of course, an area where investments are needed with, I would say, specific and very high investments are needed here. Then the new area are indeed hydrogen projects. We have on the list at present 65 hydrogen and electrolyzer projects. Important to emphasize that these projects are about pure hydrogen and they are not about blending hydrogen. So this is an important precondition in our TENI regulation. We also have an actually growing number of CO2 network projects on the list, 14 at present. And lastly, there's a specific derogation for Malta and Cyprus, which maintain one natural gas project per country on the list, which is to enable the integration of those countries physically into the internal market. This gives us 166 projects in total, 10 of which are projects of mutual interest, so with our neighbors, the UK, the Western Balkans, and North Africa. And again, these are the projects which are eligible to apply for funding. I will perhaps not go further in detail on these projects, but rather one last thing perhaps to mention to set this process into context. As many of you will have seen, we have also started a consultation on the review of our policy framework, including the 10E regulation. There's a public consultation ongoing, which will be open until August. We would, of course, invite everybody who is interested and who has some experience to share, to contribute to this public consultation. I would, on the other hand, just be very clear that this concerns a potential future review of the 10E regulation and is therefore not linked to the current CEF call, which will be conducted on the basis of the legislation as it is in force. So, of course, the CEF regulation and the 10E regulation from 2022. And that's all from my side. I give back to you, Olivier.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Now I will turn to the colleague from the legal team, Giulia Fraschetti. She will present us the key aspects of the model grant agreement.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So I am Giulia Fraschetti. I'm a member of the legal team in CINEA. And today I'm gonna try to explain to you the main legal provisions of the model grant agreement. And so of the grant agreement that you may sign with us. Thank you. In case your proposal will be selected for funding. So first of all, what is the grant agreement? It is basically a contract that you will be required to sign with us once your proposal is selected for funding. Of course, the grant agreement details all your rights and obligations vis-a-vis of the agency. So it's very important that you will read the legal provisions just to have a clear understanding of what we expect from you and, of course, about your rights. Most importantly, the grant agreement also defines the level of the grant amount and so the level of funding you will get from us. Yeah. So the grant agreement, it is a corporate structure, meaning that it is a model which has been decided and agreed by the Commission services, and it is composed by a core part plus different annexes explaining different parts of your rights and obligations. Please bear in mind that the grant management is fully electronic, meaning that all the exchanges we will have, they're going to be done via our funding and tender portal. There are several annexes that will be important for you. Please try to pay particular attention to the annex number 5, which contains several provisions that you may find interesting about, for example, the intellectual property rights, but also about the kind of communication obligations that you have in case you receive our funding, but I will tell you more later on this. Sorry, I went too quickly. Okay, so how you can participate in the grant agreement? As you may know, there are different roles that can be played once you sign the grant agreement with us. So, of course, we have beneficiary, but then also affiliated entity, associated partner, and subcontractor. Let's see who does what. So, first of all, the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the one signing the grant agreement, of course, must comply with all our criteria. And most importantly, in case we have a multi-beneficiaries grant, you have to designate a coordinator, which will be our communication channel, but we will see more about the role of the coordinator later on. The beneficiaries who are not the coordinator, who do not act as a coordinator, must accede to the grant agreement by signing the accession form. We highly recommend to set up a consortium agreement in case of a multi-beneficiaries grant, which is an internal document. You will be fully responsible and the owner of this agreement, but it may help you to regulate your interactions during the whole project implementation. On the other hand, we have the affiliated entity. The affiliated entity, they also have the obligation to implement the project tasks in line with what is described in the Annex 1, and they can declare cost under the same conditions as the beneficiaries. But the main difference with the beneficiaries is that they do not sign the grant, and also in order to fall under the definition of affiliated entity, the entity must have a link with the beneficiary, and we look for a legal or a capital link that must not be that has not to be created necessarily only for the purposes of the project implementation. And of course, affiliated entities, as much as beneficiaries, must satisfy the eligibility criteria and do not fall under the exclusion criteria. For the rest, they have to comply with the same obligations detailed under the grant agreement, which are applicable to beneficiaries. Now we go to associated partner. So they also have the obligation to implement the action tasks as described in the Annex 1, but they do not charge cost to the action, and the cost for their tasks are not eligible. They also have obligations that they need to comply with, which are those listed under Article 9.1 of the grant agreement, and they may be linked to the beneficiaries, but not necessarily. So this is one of the main differences with the affiliated entities. And then we have the subcontractor, which is a figure becoming more and more common on the CEF Energy project. This is why, because you as a beneficiary, you may decide to delegate the implementation of a certain part of your project to an external entity, which is a subcontractor. The main point to retain is that the whole project tasks cannot be carried out by a subcontractor, but only a limited part of the action can be subcontracted. The eligible cost that may be claimed by you as a beneficiary for the work carried out by the subcontractor is the price charged, is the actually the price that will be charged directly by the subcontractor to you, that generally contains a profit margin for the subcontractor, but of course not for you as a beneficiary. And this cost must be included in the estimated budget plan in the Annex 2. Okay, but let's develop a little bit more on subcontracting, since we noticed that this issue is particularly relevant for many of you. First of all, I would recommend, in case, first of all, I would like to recommend you to check the annotations to the Article 6.2.b of the AGA on subcontracting cost, because there you will find very interesting examples. The main points to retain are the following. First of all, the beneficiaries have a contractual link with subcontractors, okay? So as I said before, in case you need to delegate the implementation of certain project tasks to an external entity. So this means that only a limited part of the project may be outsourced, and also the price for the subcontracts will be declared as subcontracting costs in the financial statement. Very important to bear in mind is that the cost claimed that may be claimed by you as a beneficiary as subcontracting cost they must comply with sound financial management principles, which means they must comply with the principle of best value for money or lowest price. What does it mean, best value for money? It means that the contract has to be, was awarded taking into account several different factors: quality, cost, and efficiency. So best value for money means achieving the most effective outcome for the funds that were spent. However, in case you, as a beneficiary, you are contract authorities or contracting entities within the meaning of the EU public procurement directives, then the subcontracting procedure must be carried out in compliance with the public procurement rules. Of course, we do not want you to know by heart the EU public procurement directives, and of course you have to look at your national public procurement rules, but bear in mind these rules needs to be complied with, and we will check the compliance of the procurement procedures with those rules. Also, of course, the subcontracting procedure must be carried out ensuring the absence of any form of conflict of interest. If you look at the definition of conflict of interest in our EU financial regulation, it's very broad. So it is true that this is a very important aspect to pay attention to. And also, you are required to keep adequate records of all subcontracting processes that you may carry out in case of controls, not only from our side, but also from any EU authority which is in charge of carrying out controls, like OLAF, like EPO, or even the courts of account, so ECA. But let's go back to the consortium, and let's to better understand who does what. So the main differences between the role of a coordinator and the role of a beneficiary. As I previously said, the coordinator acts as our communication channel. So it is our intermediary for all communications we may have with the consortium. At the same time, the coordinator has several obligations vis-a-vis of the agency, but also towards you as a beneficiary. So is the one submitting the pre-financing guarantee, is the one reviewing any documents that you may want to send to us, that submit the deliverables and reports to CINEA and inform CINEA about any sort of payments to be made, and also is the one distributing the payments received from our agency among the beneficiaries being part of the consortium. At the same time, you as a beneficiary, you have a different set of obligations. First of all, you have to make sure that all the data and information stored in the portal are kept up to date, and in case there is any events that may affect the implementation of the project, you have the obligation to inform us immediately. Also, you are required to submit to the coordinator within the timeline set in the grant agreement a different set of documents, such as the financial guarantees, in case there is one, financial statements, and technical reports and deliverables linked to your project. And of course, all these documents must be submitted via the portal. Regarding the payments, so as I said before, the payments are processed by the agency directly to the coordinator. You have to bear in mind there are three different kinds of payments. pre-financing, interim payment, and payment of the balance. The pre-financing is meant to give it to you a cash flow to start implementing your project, and you will receive the pre-financing within 30 days upon to the entry into force of the agreement. Interim payments are meant to reimburse the eligible cost that you may claim during the reporting period. So during the implementation of the action, and of course the payment of the balance is the final payment, and it is meant to reimburse the remaining part of the eligible cost. Regarding the reporting, so as I said before, reporting is part of one of your obligations. You need to inform us about the implementation of the action. Of course, the language for reporting will be the same of the language of the agreement, so English. The action duration is divided into one or more reporting period. So that's why when we refer to the concept of reporting, we make a distinction between continuous and periodic reporting. So by continuous, I mean that you do have the obligation to report on the progress of the actions via the tool in the portal, and periodic reports, these must be submitted within a very specific timeline and so deadline, as indicated in the grant agreement. Please bear in mind that in case your member state is supporting the action, you also have the obligation to provide such reports to your own member state. In case there are changes affecting the implementation of the action, an amendment may be required. So you do have the right to request for an amendment via the portal. But your request must be, of course, justified, and we will not accept amendment requests that have as a purpose to make relevant changes that would call into question the award of the grant. The amendment will be signed pretty quickly, so meaning within 45 days from the reception of the request, and it enters into force on the day of the signature of the receiving party. So an amendment takes effect on the date of the entry into force or other date specified in the amendment. Please bear in mind that the grant agreement can be modified only while it is in force. What does it mean? That no amendment will be accepted after the payment of the balance. However, in exceptional circumstances, and if duly motivated, we may accept an amendment after the project end, but before the payment of the balance. Once again, just to give you a very brief overview about another set of obligations which are set in the grant agreement, it's about communication, dissemination, and visibility. So, in case you receive our funding, you will be required to inform the general public about the financing received. And to this end, you will be also requested to present the project on your website or any social media accounts linked to your entity. Of course, the public project results must be uploaded in our platform. And you have to make sure that the general public can easily acknowledge the presence of EU support for your own project. About your rights, you may decide to suspend the action in exceptional circumstances that make the project implementation impossible or not doable anymore. Actually, you may also decide to terminate the action in a only in very justified cases. At the same time, we have the same power too, meaning that we may decide to suspend and terminate the grant agreement, or just maybe to reduce the grant amount in case during the project implementation we identify the presence of substantial errors, irregularities, or fraud, or serious breach of any of the obligations listed under the grant agreement. Additional grounds that may give us the right to suspend, terminate, or reduce the grant amount may be linked to major delays in the project implementation that may compromise all the objectives of the action. So the reason why the funding was awarded to your proposal. Oh, sorry. Well, it's over. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia, for this presentation. Good morning from my side. My name is Juan de Miguel Salanova. I'm responsible for hydrogen, CO2 networks, and smart gas grids at CEF Energy at CINEA. I will be accompanying you for the rest of this session. I want to take the opportunity to say that we are receiving your questions through Slido. We see that some of you have already posted questions there. We will be addressing those at the end of the session in the part dedicated to Q&A. So please keep using this opportunity. However, if the questions are related to admissibility, eligibility conditions, award criteria, costs, you may want to wait a bit because these are going to be the next presentations that my colleagues are going to present to you. So we move on to the next presentation, which is going to be done by my colleague Dorina, and this is about the admissibility and eligibility criteria.
Yes. Good morning. Hello from my side too. My name is Dorina Yoga, and I am project officer within Unit B4 of CINEA. I'm going to guide you in the next couple of minutes, not more than that, 10-15 minutes, on the admissibility and eligibility criteria. Admissibility concerns all the criteria that assess the completeness of the information as you provided, and it can be found, the information can be found in section 5 of the VOL document. So what are the overall general admissibility criteria? First of all, in order to be admissible, you'll need to submit your proposals via the Funding and Tenders portal. Please note that paper versions are not possible. You will also need to provide complete information, so you have to attach all the requested documents, annexes, and supporting documents, and then submit them via the portal, as I said, with the templates from the portal. And then they also need to be readable, accessible, and printable. What it is important to say is that the deadline is 16th of September, 2025, as already mentioned by Olivia this morning, at 5 o'clock set Brussels time. This gives you sufficient time, we hope, to provide good quality proposals. So we wish you good luck. So what is the structure of the proposal? So in order to be admissible, you'll need to have several parts, let's say. The first part is called Part A, and in that one will need to be filled directly in the portal. You'll have to provide administrative information as well as the summarized budget. Then we have Part B, which is, I would say, the core document, in the sense that it contains the technical description of the project. You should keep in mind that we cannot have more than 120 pages. And for that, you will need to download the documents from the system and re-upload them again in the submission platform. And then we have a mandatory set of annexes and supporting documents for all works and studies proposals. So take that into account. We need to provide a detailed budget, per work package, a Gantt chart, an agreement by the concerned member states, the environmental compliance file, and the 10E compliance form. For the annual activity reports and the list of previous projects, there are some exemptions as shown on the screen, which are the public bodies, member states, organization, international organization, and certified TSO. We also wanted to raise awareness. You see on the screen that some templates have been modified. So please use those. Have a look at the latest templates and use those in order for your application to be eligible and admissible. Then we also wanted to raise awareness based on previous experience on some of the mandatory annexes. And I refer here firstly to the letter of support. So, for example, if the applicant is established in Belgium, but your proposed project happens in the Netherlands, the letter of support has to come from the countries where the action happens. If you have the action happens in more than 2 countries, you'll need to provide the letters of support for the countries where the action happens. So that it will need, of course, to be duly signed, and it concerns all applicants. Then we have the annual activity report and list of previous projects, and this is something that we I would say we experienced many issues last year with those, and I wanted to raise awareness on the annual report. This is something, it's a document that normally is done for the board or for the shareholders. It's not a document that is created for the purpose of the proposed project. So therefore, you will need to submit that document. If you do not have one, we kindly ask you to submit an equivalent document to show your know-how, experience, and resources to implement the project. The list of previous projects also concerns the applicant's projects, and please take into account the fact that besides the fact that you have to put an annex to the proposal, you also have a template within part B at the very end. I'll show you on the next slide, where you have to fill the information about the list of projects. And I repeat again, it has to concern the applicant mainly. We have the environmental compliance file then. It has to be completed in full for works and studies. And please be very careful when you assess your proposals, because we have sometimes cases, or we have encountered from experience, we say, sometimes applicants would say, this is a study without physical intervention, but then within the scope of the study, or we would notice that there is a part dedicated to marine survey or geotechnical surveys, which actually might require physical intervention. They are not only desktop studies, therefore you will need to submit the compliance file in full. Oops, sorry, I moved on too fast. So this is the place I show you again on the screen where you can find information about the annexes. And this is in the middle, you have really the template for the list of previous projects. It's really at the end of part B, and under history of changes, please fill that in as well, because this is really important for us to be able to assess fully your experience. And then we have, this is the screenshot, I would say, of the environmental compliance file, and you can tick one of the 3 boxes in there depending on your type of proposal. Then in addition to the documents that are compulsory for all works and proposals, we mentioned before the annexes, you also need to provide a set of mandatory documents for works proposals only in this case. And we have, this will vary, will depend very much on the type of, on the sector and the type of proposal you apply for. So you have on the screen, you have for electricity an Article 24 of 10-year regulation. So that concerns all electricity, including regulated electricity storage. You'll need to provide a full CBA, a full CBCA, the cross-border cost allocation, as well as a business plan and other assessment that show that your project cannot be financed by the market and or through the regulatory framework. Similar or not, I mean, there are a few differences for smart electricity grids and cross-border CO2 networks. Also applicable to non-regulated electricity storage, you'll need to provide, again, a full CBA, project-specific, an evaluation that is carried out by the national regulatory authorities or another authority in charge to show, to demonstrate significant positive externalities and lack of commercial viability in accordance with the CBA and the business plan. And of course, you'll need to provide a business plan and other assessment to show the fact that your project is not commercially viable. Then for hydrogen, you have a full project-specific CBA that you'll need to provide. And in case hydrogen is regulated in your jurisdiction, you'll need to provide a legally valid CBCA. If hydrogen is not regulated in your jurisdiction, then you'll need to provide a confirmation by the relevant NRA or any other authority to show that hydrogen is not regulated and is not under the competence of that respective authority. And then as well, business plan and other assessment to show that your project cannot be financed by the market or through regulatory framework. Then we have eligibility. So in addition to admissibility, we have the eligibility phase. And per se, this concerns section 6 of the call, but we also have the financial and operational capacity check that concerns section 7 of the call document. And with that, we assess whether your project is in scope and whether you meet the criteria to apply. Needless to say that in order to be able to apply, you will need to be part of the list that was mentioned by Joachim this morning. So the first list of PCIs and PMIs. And then we cover two types of topics, studies in the meaning of CEF Energy and works in the meaning of CEF Energy. For studies, we normally cover, we finance preparatory studies such as pre-FEED, FEED studies, AEA, permitting, all the phases before the implementation of the PCI or the PMI. And for works, we cover mainly development, construction, installation activity related to eligible infrastructure items of PCI or PMIs, and we cover activities or, let's say, scope such as EPCI contracts, construction and commissioning of a PCI or a PMI. Bianca will give you afterwards, after the break, more information on how to provide a successful proposal, but I wanted to already raise awareness that studies and works topics cannot be combined under the same proposal. In terms of eligibility of applicants and countries, in order for you to be eligible, you will need to be a legal entity, either a public or private body, and you will need to be established in one of the target or eligible countries. And we refer here to the EU member states, including overseas countries and territories, non-EU member states that are associated to CEF program or that are in ongoing negotiation for an association agreement, and this association agreement has to be signed before the grant agreement signature, and we have here the case of Moldova and Ukraine. And then we also wanted to raise awareness on the fact that we provide exceptional funding for entities that are not part of the target and eligible countries, and this is the case when the granting authorities consider the participation of that entity essential to the implementation of a PCI or a PMI. There are other specific cases regarding eligibility which you can find in the section 6 of the call document. And last part of my presentation is what we call financial and operational capacity checks. These are also very important. The operational capacity check is done during the, the documentation has to be provided during the proposal's application. And really, you see here that we do this, you need to provide the applicant's activity report and the list of previous projects. This is really key for us to be able to assess your operational capacity. And we also need to provide the description of the participants. This is needed in order for us to know that you have the know-how, the qualification and resources to implement the project, and also that you have sufficient experience in projects of comparable size. Then for financial capacity check, this is also assessed during the evaluation of the project, but you will need to provide the documentation if your proposal is successful and you will be granted an amount under CEF. Then you will need to provide the documents like profit and loss account, balance sheet, and signed audit report. And this is done, then the check is done during the grant agreement preparation by a body of the European Commission. Then we have extensions. In this case, as already mentioned on slide 5, in this case, those that are exempted are the public bodies, member state organization, international organization, as well as the certified TSOs. And we wanted also to raise awareness on the certification because we received already some questions via the functional mailbox. The date of the certification doesn't matter, but what matters is that this certificate is still valid and there have been no changes that would require a new certification decision. So with that, I finished my part on admissibility and eligibility, but we still have two slides of questions to check whether you have been listening to us or not. So I'll put on the next slide. I will read the questions and give you 20 seconds, Monica. Yeah. I am affiliated entity implementing the proposed project. Does the applicant to which I am affiliated have to demonstrate its financial and operational capacity as well? Do we give time? Yeah. You monitor? Yeah, you can? Okay. So do you see? Okay, we're going to, so the correct answer is yes, indeed, they have to do it. And then the next question is, I am an applicant, an SPV, so a special vehicle, purpose vehicle in a project proposals, but I do not have my own annual activity report. Is it sufficient if I submit that annual activity report of my mother company or the group of companies I belong to, operate under? 20 seconds, yeah. Yeah, and then the correct answer is no. And I will highlight again, as an applicant, I need to demonstrate that I have the right know-how, qualification, and resources to successfully implement the project. Therefore, I need to submit an equivalent document if I don't have an annual report. If I submit the annual report of a mother company or a group I operate under, I need to clearly specify to which parts I am referring to. With that, I thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a productive day.
Thank you very much, Dorina. And the next presentation is going to be done by my colleague Anduela. She's going to explain to you the award criteria for evaluating your proposals. So please, Anduela, whenever you want.
Thank you, Juan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your interest and participation at this info session. My name is Anduela Girgi. I am project advisor and a member of the team Hydrogen, Smart Grids, and CO2 Networks. So I would like to re-show you the part of the slide which was shown initially by our director, Olivier Silla, in order to set up the scene. So Dorina presented the preliminary checks part, admissibility, eligibility checks. Now I am going to present you the two following columns in the process, which is the external evaluation and then the internal committee and final selection, but only to indicate which are the award criteria taken into account in these two steps of the process. So the second step, it is, sorry, I need to go back to this. So the evaluation, the external evaluation is done, it's an individual assessment done by 3 external experts, which each of them present an individual assessment form, and then we meet for a consensus meeting where we produce a consensus report. And this is based on 3 criteria, which are evaluated at CINEA, and it is the criteria that I will show you in the following slide. And then there is the internal committee and final selection, and there it is done at commission level, and then there are 2 specific criteria out of 5 which are taken into consideration. So the overall outcome then, it is the result of the evaluation of these 5 criteria. So which are these 5 criteria? Priority and urgency, as well as catalytic effect, are evaluated by DG Energy with the assistance of CINEA, and maturity, quality, and impact are evaluated from the external experts moderated by CINEA. The minimum pass score, the overall one, is 15 and the maximum score 25, meaning that the passing score for each criterion, it is a 3 and the maximum score is a 5. Priority and urgency of the action. This is then an award criterion which is evaluated by DG Energy. In this case, what are the elements that the applicant should demonstrate? It is how the proposed action will contribute to sectoral policy objectives. In particular, the applicant should explain how these are aligned with the EU climate and energy targets in view of reaching the climate neutrality. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that in each slide you see on top right an indication where there are more details concerning the content of each slide I will present. So in this case, priority and urgency, you will find information under the call document section 9 and also part B of the application form in section 1. The second element that the applicant should demonstrate under priority and urgency of the action is how the proposed action contributes to the market integration, including through ending energy isolation, technologies PCI contributing to the decarbonization of the economy, biogas, renewable and low carbon hydrogen, investment in offshore electricity grids, and with the aim of reaching at least 300 gigabytes of offshore and wind generation, which is part of the priority of the call. So priority and urgency of the action overall is linked to the priorities of the call. Another important element is that the applicant should demonstrate synergetic elements with transport and the digital sector needed to significantly improve the socioeconomic, climate, or environmental benefits of the proposed action. Concerning again the priority and urgency of the action, it is important to highlight the EU added value of the action related to PCI PMI is demonstrated already by the PCI PMI status itself. PMIs should also demonstrate that the inclusion of the third country is indispensable to achieve their objectives. Now, concerning the Article 24 PCIs, which was anticipated earlier, introduced earlier, the proposal needs to demonstrate that the PCI is designated in view of ensuring access to future energy markets, including hydrogen, shall not lead to a prolongation of the lifetime of natural gas assets, and shall ensure the interoperability of neighboring networks across borders. Now I will explain the three criteria which are evaluated by the external experts. And the first one is maturity. What is about this criteria? Under this criteria, the applicant should demonstrate preparatory steps are already completed or envisaged, indicating that the project can be carried out without delay. The confirmation that the proposed project is mature enough to be financed under this year call. The justification that the project is the next logical step in the implementation of the project. Then indication of the procurement procedures needed, contracts awarded and planned. It is important to provide a summary of the public consultation only for works, authorization, approvals and permits again for works. And under works, under Article 24 proposals, they should demonstrate and include relevant evidence as to the proposed conversion into a dedicated hydrogen asset by 2036. Also, of course, if the market conditions allow as well. And they should present a roadmap for doing so with a precise timeline. Oh, sorry. Concerning the quality, quality is a very, like all the award criteria, but an important aspect here. The applicant is requested to provide information, detailed information on resources needed, financial and human, to implement the proposed project, evidence that the project is correctly sized. It is important to highlight here that the project management costs should not exceed 10% of the total project costs. The organizational structure should be, information should be provided about the organization and cooperation also between the applicants. Again, concerning the project management, it is important to provide the project management structure, but also quality assurance and control procedures put in place by the applicant for the implementation, for the successful implementation of the proposed project. Risk management methods and procedure and risk assessments, including mitigation measures, should equally be provided. The impact criterion is, okay, how do I say? It's a heavy criterion because it includes 4 sub-criteria which will be evaluated under impact. And these are one, the externalities. The second one is environmental and climate impact. The third, need to overcome financial obstacles. And the fourth, the cross-border dimension. Positive externalities is an extremely important element under the impact criterion. This criterion should score minimum 3 in order for the impact to score 3. So it is a condition to a passing mark for this criterion. Positive externalities, they build on the CBA, namely in terms of security of supply, system flexibility, innovation, solidarity among the member states, and quantify and monetize the extent possible of the externalities. It is an obligation of the applicant under this criterion. Just I would like as an overall remark, so impact for studies and for works changes. I would like just for impact for studies is only linked to the need to overcome financial obstacles, and for works the rest. So if I don't mention each time works, it is impact is for works when it is not only need to overcome financial obstacles. So to take it back to the externalities, just very quickly to explain what do we mean with all these elements of which externalities is composed. So for security of supply, it is important to quantify the positive impact of the action at the regional level, but also beyond the involved member states. For system flexibility, you should quantify externalities in terms of project contribution to flexibility effects by non-constructing countries. Solidarity, it is about the impact for both constructing and not constructing countries of the proposed action. Innovation, information of the benefits of the technology compared to a conventional solution, for example, cost saving, replicability of results. It is important, finally, to specify the extent of the significant externalities in view of the request of funding rate. In case of request co-funding rate higher than 50%, then you should provide a detailed justification of these exceptional circumstances which justify a higher funding rate. Concerning now the environmental and climate impact, you are expected to provide positive and negative impacts for the project and underlying PCI on climate change targets, emission of air pollutants, reduction of GHG emissions, and any other measures foreseen to prevent and mitigate environmental impact. Climate resilience and climate proofing, you should also provide information under this section, as well as, concerning now financial obstacles, it is important that you provide information how the public funding would help to overcome financial obstacles. It is extremely important that at this section, for studies and for works, please, you provide information that you have looked elsewhere for financial support and you have not found. And this is because the CEF funding is the last resort of financial support, as it was explained earlier. The cross-border dimension, it is about the area of impact of the project with the member state concerned and the cooperation between member state and promoters. It will be later explained that substantiating the cooperation between member states and under the cross-border dimension, it is a plus for the project proposal. So if relevant, cooperation may also refer to other countries beyond those where the action takes place. Concerning now hydrogen, PCIs and PMIs, these are projects which do not fall under the competence of national regulatory authorities, and of course they do not receive a cross-border cost allocation decision. In this case, it is important that they demonstrate cumulatively that the project aims to provide services across borders, brings technological innovation, and ensures the safety of cross-border grid operation. Concerning the last criterion, which will then be evaluated, as I said, together with the first criterion by DG Energy, this is a catalytic effect of union assistance. The applicant should demonstrate, in this case, in a very detailed way, the need for EU funds, why the CEF grant makes a positive difference to the action in terms of facilitating or accelerating its implementation, for example. Explain the difficulties of obtaining market finance, how the grant can help to overcome this shortage. The way the CEF grant can help to mobilize additional public or private sources of financing. The applicant should equally demonstrate if all costs are included in the tariffs and there are no substantial risk with the project promoters, there might not be a stimulating effect of the grant. For PCI of PMI's proposal for grant for works, the evaluation of the financial gap should take into account the cross-border cost allocation decision and, if applicable, regulatory incentives. I hope you have listened carefully, because now I have a couple of questions for you. So the first one is, what is the maximum funding rate for work applications? Is it same as for studies, 50%, a maximum of 90%, or higher than 50% under certain circumstances? You tell me, Una. Okay, the correct answer is higher than 50% under certain circumstances. So in my previous slide, under externalities, I explained that although the maximum funding rate is 50% for the cost of studies and works, applicants can apply for a higher project funding rate if the project provides a higher degree or regional EU-wide support security of supply, strengthen the solidarity of the EU, or comprises highly innovative solutions as defined in the 10T regulation. The second slide, the second question is about the project management costs. The question is, what are the maximum project management costs? Maximum of 30%, should not exceed 10% of the total project's cost, or higher than 10% under certain circumstances. Although you wanted 30%, should not exceed 10% of total project cost, and this is indicated under the quality criterion based in the call document under budget categories and cost eligibility rules. You will read this, but just would like to read the last phrase, which is, cost exceeding this limit will be rejected during the grant preparation. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck with the application.
Many thanks, Anduera, for your presentation. So with this, we have concluded the first part of this info day, and now we have a coffee break, and the coffee break will be until 10:50, as you can see on the screen. So we have been efficient in the first part, finishing ahead of time, so now we have a little bit more time for a break. So please be back at 10:50, 10:50 Central European Time, Brussels time, and we will be back as well. Thank you, and see you later. Okay, so hello again, and we are resuming now the info day for this call for proposals for CEF Energy for PCIs and PMIs. We have still some important and interesting presentations to make to you. And the first one of them is from my colleague Bianca. She will be presenting to you, explaining to you how to prepare a successful proposal. Bianca, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Juan. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bianca Holdford, and I am project advisor at CINEA in the CEF Energy department. Sorry. There's a slide missing. Okay. It's okay? So the structure of my presentation is basically divided into two parts. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about terminology, which are the building blocks of your proposal. And then I will go on to giving you very concrete examples. And then we will end, of course, with the Slido. So do make sure you pay attention because you will be tested at the end. Just before I start, I'd like to say that this presentation will make much more sense to you if you are already familiar with the templates. So if you're not familiar with the templates, I do advise that you familiarize yourself and then watch this session again. I think it will be far more helpful for you and much easier to follow. So let's get started with terminology. So we often see a confusion between the terms PCI, PMI, and project in the applications. So this is just a reminder to all of you what are PCIs, PMIs, and projects. So a PCI, as you should all know, are projects of common interest. PMIs are projects of mutual interest. And they are energy infrastructure projects which are located on priority corridors. So an example of a PCI would be PCI 12.1 ACON. Now, a project is a part of a PCI. So, for instance, technical studies would be an example of a project. And the definition that we have in the CEF regulation is that a project is something which is financially and technically independent. It has a set time frame and it's necessary for the implementation of your project. So why is this important? Well, the very first part of the application form, under section 0, you will be asked to talk about the scope of the project and how it fits within the PCI. So it's very important that you can distinguish between these two terms so that you can do a good job of answering these very first questions in your application form. The work package is also a very important building block in your proposal. And a work package is a major subdivision of a project or an action. And you can see on the slide that we have here examples of work packages for studies and for works, so that should be some inspiration for you. Work packages can run parallel to each other or they can be sequential, and they can also be interdependent with each other. So for instance, the results of work package 1 will feed directly into work package 2. We'll look at examples later on in my presentation, of course. A task is another very important term that that's important that you understand. A task is essentially a contract. And it is something which will be subcontracted or carried out externally. And again, on the slide, you can see examples of tasks or contracts for both studies and works. Like I said, tasks will be subcontracted or carried out externally. So depending on what type of entity you are, you'll have to carry out public procurement and follow the directives, and most certainly always follow sound financial management. My colleague Julia touched upon these topics, so if you need a bit of a refresher, I recommend you listen to her part of the info day once again. Now, milestones are also very important in building your application, and they're often confused with deliverables. So what is a milestone? a milestone is basically a major control point in a project. So it allows you to chart progress. You must ensure that it's linked to the scope of your work package, and that it is not the same as your deliverable. So a milestone is basically about a process. Also very important to bear in mind is that we frequently see a very, very long list of milestones in the application forms. And actually less is more in this case. So what we're actually looking for are the quality of the milestones that you present to us, that they have to make sense. 10 milestones for a work package which lasts just a couple of months is not really much added value. We will look into examples later on in the presentation, and the comments that I'm making now will make more sense to you. So like I said, a milestone is not a deliverable. So what is a deliverable? A deliverable is actually the final output of a work package. So for instance, a final detailed design would be an example of a deliverable. We recommend that you use only one deliverable per work package. Again, it has to be linked to the scope of your work package, and that and they should not overlap with your milestones. All right, so having bombarded you with lots of terminology, let's just say that it's like building a house, really, putting a proposal together. You have your sound foundation, which is the PCI PMI list. You have your house, the structure, which is your project. Within your project, you have your windows and your doors, which are your work packages, your tasks, and your milestones. And your final deliverable are the key to your house. So if you think about it in these terms, you'll see that it's actually quite simple to put an application together, as long as all of your pieces fit together. Right, now that we've talked about terminology, I want to go and dive deep into a couple of examples. So let's start at the very beginning. Next slide, please. Super, thank you. So let's start at the very beginning with a start date. Now, the start date is important because it marks when your costs are eligible. It must, of course, be after the application was submitted. And do make sure that you don't have a start date which is on a weekend or on a bank holiday. It has to be a date that actually makes sense and that you will realistically be starting your project. We always recommend that your start date is aligned with the first milestone, so something like a kickoff meeting or signature of a contract, whatever is relevant in your proposal. And it's also a very good indicator of how mature your project is. So if you have a start date, say within the next 2 years' time, then of course it's quite clear to us that your project isn't very mature to start. Now, your end date is equally important, and you should really make sure that it's realistic and achievable. It's also the cutoff point for eligible costs. So, for instance, if you have a very complex project, works project, for instance, it would make sense that your end date is only 6 months. So think about your end date and obviously your start date, because that marks the duration of your project. Now, end dates can be changed only under very exceptional circumstances. So if you are one of the lucky ones to be granted funding for your project, the end date can be discussed to a very limited extent once you get to the grant agreement preparation phase. So just to reiterate, do think carefully about the duration of your proposal. Right, now let's go back to a couple of examples on work packages. And here are a couple of rules of thumb. And then I will show you what the actual application looks like and what we expect to see in a good application form. So like I said, a work package is really the basis of the proposal. So make sure that your description is clear and concise. Also make sure that you describe the technical aspects in an understandable way. do mention interdependencies if they are applicable, and ensure that they are linked to your tasks. So let's have a look at what this actually looks like on the application form. So you can see on the top right-hand corner, it's part B, section 6. And in this example, we have a work package which lasts about 2 years. And you're expected to write a description of your work package. So there are three important aspects to how you describe your work package: objective, scope, and interdependencies. So as long as you make sure that that information is there, you're on your way to having a good work package description. So objectives, what is your project about? What is it that you're actually doing? Scope, do talk about the technical parameters. Elaborate a bit more on what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it. And then lastly, talk about any interdependencies. So like I said, you could have things like the results of work package 1 being interdependent with work package 2, 3, or 4. So it's important that you show this in your application form. Tasks are a part of your work package description, so it's important that they are both aligned. So I remind you that a task is actually a contract. So it's something that you will be carrying out externally. Your contracts are expected to be listed per work package, and you are also expected to provide the percentage subcontracting per task. So again, let's have a look at the application form. So you will see on the top you have your work package description, which we've just gone through, and then directly underneath you have your task table. And here you're expected to list all the tasks or contracts which will fall under this work package, and you will see on the far right-hand corner the percentage of subcontracting that will be used. So it's important that you pay attention to that and fill it in correctly. All right. So, like I said, milestones are about progress, and they can actually be quite challenging to put together. So, we'll take a look at a couple of examples. So, just to start off with, a couple of rules of thumb for your milestone table. Each work package should have at least 2 milestones, one that marks the beginning and one that marks the end. Unless your last milestone, your end milestone, is the same as a deliverable. The reason is we don't want milestones and deliverables to overlap. If you have a work package that lasts more than a year, then ideally you should have intermediate milestones, so say a milestone every 12 months. Milestones also come with means of verification, and make sure that these are reliable, realistic, and simple. And like I said, and I will say throughout the presentation, milestones are not deliverables and therefore they shouldn't overlap. So let's take a look at a concrete example. So here we have an example of studies, and this work package lasts 12 months only. So you can see that you have a milestone marking the beginning, milestone 1, and a milestone marking the end. You will also notice that your first milestone should be aligned with your start date. And you will see on the right-hand side of the table the means of verification. Now, means of verification are the way that we can verify that the milestone has been achieved, and there's no need to overcomplicate it. They should be easy to verify, which means they can be things like minutes of a meeting or acknowledgement of some document from a competent authority. Like I said, this presentation really makes more sense when you're familiar with the templates, and also whilst you're preparing your application, I think you can get quite a bit of inspiration from these slides for you to really grasp the level of simplicity in terms of being concise in writing your application forms. Right, now let's have a look at another example of milestones. This time we have a work package which lasts 2 years and is for works, so a little bit more complicated. Again, we have a milestone marking the beginning and a milestone marking the end. And you'll notice that we have an intermediate milestone. So more or less 12 months after the start of the work package. Now, I've also highlighted the third milestone, which is just to reiterate that if it overlaps with your deliverable, so it's the same, you've chosen the same milestone as you have a deliverable, which could be the case, then we advise that you just have it as a deliverable. You don't need to have a milestone identical to your deliverable. So, of course, this is not always the case, but it could be that they overlap. All right. Now let's have a look at the deliverables. Like I said at the beginning, we always recommend that you have one deliverable, so one final output per work package. Again, the deliverable description should be quite simple, and it should not contain highly sensitive information. And I'll explain why in a minute. And again, deliverables should not overlap with your milestones. So you can see here on this slide, I've also put in two examples, one for studies and one for works. And you will see on the left-hand side that we have one deliverable per work package, and you've got examples of what deliverables look like. So, for instance, technical studies. And you will also see halfway through this slide, the deliverable description should be something which is simple. What I mean by this is that you don't need to write a book about it. You just have to be concise and really to the point under this section. Now, the level of sensitivity for deliverables should be low. Why? So again, if you're lucky enough to be awarded funding, come the grant agreement preparation time, deliverables are something that have to be sent to CINEA and validated. So we don't want to have documents which are highly sensitive. So really do think carefully about your deliverables, not only because they are the final output of a work package, but in terms of the sensitivity of the data that you are sharing. Now, I didn't talk about risks under terminology because the word is rather self-explanatory, but risks are nonetheless very, very important. So there's a risk table in the application form, and it's very important that when you talk about the risks, they are directly related to your project, and you don't talk about risks at the PCI level. Like I said right at the beginning, PCI and project are two different things. So do make sure that you describe your risks appropriately. Risks should be in line with the scope. So if you're submitting a proposal for studies, don't start talking about the risks related to the works phase. That's not exactly what we're looking for. Mitigation measures should also be well described and clear. And you are also expected to provide information on the risk level and likelihood. And lastly, obviously, make sure that your risks cover all the work packages. So let's take a look at the application form. You will see in the grey part, at the top of the table, there is always very good guidance on the level of information, level of detail required for you to fill in the application form. So I've mentioned it here under risks, but it's for every other part of the application form. Do make sure that you read the guidance on what it is that we're expecting you to write about, and do follow it. So as I was saying, for risks, you are expected to provide the level of risk and likelihood, so high, medium, and low. And make sure that your mitigating measures are meaningful and are related to your project and obviously to your risks and your work packages. So literally the key to success is in your hands. Like I said, it's like building a house. Make sure that all your bricks and mortar are in place so that you can have a successful application. There should be a common thread that runs through your proposal, showing that there is coherence between your work packages, your milestones, your tasks, your deliverables, your risks, right in a concise way, so that it's understandable to the experts who will be evaluating your proposal. And I always recommend to perhaps ask somebody from another department to proofread your application. People who don't prepare the application themselves sometimes pick up on things that you might not. So it's always very important to proofread things. And as I mentioned before, do make sure that you are answering the questions that are actually asked of you. So with that, I think we can go on to our little test, Slido. So who should prepare the application? Is it the PCI PMI promoter? Is it a consultant? Is it an intern? Or is it an external agency? Okay, so hopefully you all got this correct. The answer is A, the PCI PMI promoters or the applicant is the one who should, who knows the project best and is in best position to prepare the application form, and of course who's responsible for implementing it. Now the second one should be easy for all of you. A deliverable is the same as a milestone, the final output of a work package, a major control point in a project, or it's necessary only if no milestone is in place. All right, so the correct answer is B. It's the final output of a work package. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for this comprehensive and clear presentation. And now we move on to the next topic, which is budget management for your proposals, and it will be myself presenting this. I would just ask for the clicker, please. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so budget information is of course very important in your proposals. It's one of the most important data that you have to make sure that you get it right and that we get it right in your proposal. And so in order to prepare information on your budget and costs, the first step is to have a very clear identification of the costs that you expect to incur for the activities that you are including in your proposed project. So please, before starting to prepare the application, starting to download documents and fill out these documents, you need to have already a very well-prepared budget and a very clear idea of the costs that you expect to incur. I would invite all applicants to consult the relevant section on legal and financial setup of the grant agreements. This is section 10 of the call document. And there you can find a part which is related to budget categories and cost eligibility. So please pay attention to this section because it includes very relevant information for you as to what kind of costs can be accepted, not accepted in eligibility, and other principles that you need to take into consideration. I would also like to remind in this first slide that in this program for CEF Energy, we only work with actually incurred costs. So the payments that will be done for your project, if it's selected for funding, if it's implemented, will be based on actual costs incurred and not lump sums or other kind of costs. There is just one exception to this, is that it is possible to use unit costs for one of the cost categories, which is personnel costs, where average costs could be used. There is some guidance that we provide also as part of the documents in the funding attendance portal to understand how this can be done. And that is the only cost category where you can actually use unit costs and average costs. For all the rest, it should be real, actual costs. Another important reminder is that it is not possible to submit proposals which combine both studies and works activities. So the proposal needs to be for a project only for studies or only for works, but not combined. This means that in particular for works proposals, the cost category related to studies should not include any costs, and this I will show in a moment. So some considerations on eligibility and ineligibility of costs. You can see in this slide some examples of, or basically some criteria that costs need to comply in order to be eligible, and also I'm showing below some examples of costs that are ineligible for our program. So what kind of costs could be eligible? They need to comply with certain criteria. They need to be necessary for the implementation of the project. They need to be reasonable. They need to be verifiable. They need to be justified and comply with some financial management principles, which means, as my colleague Julia explained before, that for any contracting, subcontracting that you're going to do, or any purchases that you're going to do, you need to show that you're applying best value for money, or even applying the public procurement rules, if that is applicable to you as an applicant, to your project. You also need to demonstrate that you're complying with all the conditions and the requirements in the public procurement rules as transposed in your country. On the other hand, there are a number of costs that are ineligible as such, and these are return on capital, VAT, costs of land and building acquisition, any currency exchange losses, any excessive or reckless expenditure, in-kind contributions by third parties, or indirect costs. For example, any common costs that you have in your company that are not exclusively related to the project implementation. All these costs would be ineligible, so please do not include any of them in your proposal. Now let's see what kind of information and what documents you need to fill out to send us the data on the cost for your project. So this is basically two different documents, or two different parts of the application documents. One is the detailed budget breakdown per cost category, and this is information that is encoded directly in the system, in the submission module. And the second one is a detailed budget table per work package, per reporting period, applicant, and affiliated entity if it exists. This is information that is filled out in a specific file, in an Excel file that needs to be uploaded to the application. Both documents, both parts are mandatory for all applications, studies and works. And so if one of them or the two of them are not available in your application will not be admissible, and then therefore it will not be evaluated. So let's look in detail at how each of these two budget tables look like. First of all, the budget breakdown per cost category is a table that is structured financial information, and this is encoded directly on the funding and tenders portal. It's a table, as you can see in the slide, with many cost categories. And this should be filled out per participant in the application. So this means for every applicant, every affiliated entity in the project. Please be aware, though, that not all the columns of this table apply for CEF Energy. And I'm going to enlarge a bit the zoom so that you see exactly which cost categories are applicable, which ones are not applicable. First of all, also a reminder that the maximum co-funding rate that you can apply for is 50% as a general rule, and there is only one exception to this, which is for construction works proposals. If you're able to demonstrate that the proposal or the proposed project will have a significantly high level of positive externalities, and the proposal is for hydrogen or electricity works, then you may apply to up to 75% co-funding. For all of the proposals, the maximum is 50%. And then, as I said, for this budget table per cost category, there are a number of categories that you can see in the slide. Basically, the main three categories are personnel, subcontracting, and purchases. And you can see in the table the columns that relate to these elements. The other columns are not eligible and therefore are not to be filled. So the columns related to SME owners or natural person beneficiaries, financial support to third parties, land purchases, or indirect costs. This should all be at zero. If there is any cost in these tables, it will not be considered. It will not be considered eligible, so it could not be funded. For the other categories, personnel costs, subcontracting, purchases, please consider when preparing the application what is the right column, the right category to fill. And here I'm going to explain to you which costs should be under each of these three categories. So personnel costs, this means costs for employees, costs for staff, natural persons working under a direct contract with the beneficiary, with the applicant, or seconded staff working on the project. Please be aware, as explained by my colleague Anduala this morning, that project management costs for your project should not exceed 10% of the total cost of the project. Any costs exceeding this limit will be rejected. So please, when preparing your application and your budget in particular, be aware that you have this ceiling, and if you structure your proposal, for example, with a specific work package which relates to project management and coordination, that work package should not have more than 10% costs of the total project. Or if you have other elements in that work package, not only the project management, you need to explain, you need to break down the cost to explain and to ensure that the maximum cost for this kind of activity is 10% of the total cost of the project. This is especially relevant for studies. Subcontracting costs, these are costs for contracts for goods, works or services that are necessary and part of the proposed project tasks. Examples of these are shown in the slide. So for example, contracts to prepare environmental studies or engineering design for future construction of the project. These kind of studies could be subject to subcontracting, but also, of course, when it comes to the construction as such, for works proposals, you may have a number of contracts. So it's important to remind that you have to respect public procurement if it's applicable to you, if you're a contracting authority or if an entity that is subject to these rules. And if you're not subject to these rules, at least you have to ensure best value for money, which means ensuring sufficient transparency and competition when tendering the contracts. Finally, purchase costs. These are goods, works or services that are purchased to execute the project, but that do not entail as such tasks described in the grant agreement. So other costs that are not included in the subcontracting, but that as an applicant or as a beneficiary you will need to purchase or to buy, this could be included in this category. Examples of this could be travel and subsistence costs for trips related to the project tasks or meetings, equipment if it's purchased directly by the beneficiaries and not as part of a bigger contract with a subcontractor, and other works, goods or services that are common to, are necessary for the project, but not entailing project tasks, such as consumable supplies, promotion and dissemination materials, translation, etc. These, however, need to be directly related to the project implementation and not generic for the company, in which case would be indirect and not eligible. And now let's look at the other table that you need to submit, and this is the budget table per work package. This is unstructured financial information which you need to encode in an Excel file. The template, you can download it from the submission system, the submission portal on Funding and Tenders portal. You can download it, fill out the information and upload it again as part of your application. There's a special section for that in the system. The breakdown here is different, so you have to indicate the cost you will have per work package for each of the work packages of your project, and also for each of the participants, so for the applicants and affiliated entities, if these exist. And you also have to provide the breakdown per reporting period. Julia explained before what a reporting period is, so this is the reporting periods are the main time periods in which you are going to structure your project timeline according to the duration of the project, according to the milestones and deliverables that you're going to have. So you need to also give us the breakdown of costs per reporting period. The first sheet of this Excel file includes the instructions that you have to follow. It's very comprehensive, so please pay attention to that before filling out the file. And some of the information in this file is automatically calculated. So the file includes 5 Excel sheets. You can see them all in this slide. You have to fill them out in order. So you should start by the first one, including the project number and project acronym. Then the second one, the names of the work packages. Third one, the names of the participants, including affiliated entities. And then the fourth sheet will already be ready for you with all this information. And then you have to include the cost breakdown in the white cells. The gray cells, these are protected, these are automatically calculated, so you don't need to modify those. You only need to include the figures, the data in the white cells. For a few words also about reporting period duration. In our program, the standard duration of reporting periods is 24 months, and they cannot be shorter in any case than 6 months, but you are free to propose reporting periods according to the optimal breakdown that you consider for your project. We invite you not to include too many reporting periods. So for example, you don't need to consider one reporting period for each calendar year. This is not necessary. So as a rule, 24 months, but for example, if you have a study that lasts a little bit more, 26, 28, 30 months even, you can still consider one single reporting period if you consider that in the middle of the project there would not be too many meaningful deliverables, or that you will not have sufficient costs to claim. Then maybe it's wiser to just consider one single reporting period. At the end of each reporting period, you will have to submit what we call the REPA, so a periodic report, as it was explained before. So please consider what is the optimal breakdown for your project. And the fifth sheet is a control sheet. So if you see there any red figures, it's not a good sign. Please check the cost that you have encoded. This is a control. If it should appear as zeros if the budget has been already encoded. Some final tips. The total costs that you indicate in the two tables, the table per cost category, the table per work package, should match. And if they do not match, which we expect it would not be the case, then the information in the budget per cost category prevails. So in the structured data, the one that is encoded in the system. We also invite you to familiarize yourself with the model grant agreement provisions. There you can find all the conditions for costs to be eligible, the best value for money provisions that you need to comply with. So it's very important that you are aware of these provisions already before starting to prepare your application. And please be aware also that you need to have all these costs accounted, because they need to be verifiable. So after the project is completed and we pay, we can still carry out audits, and the audits will look at your accounts and will make sure that all the costs that you're declaring are eligible and accounted for. So this is the end of my presentation. I will move now to 2 questions that we have for you, and I hope you have paid sufficient attention to reply correctly to this. The first one is, where do applicants have to encode budget information? There are 4 options. A, funding and tenders portal in the submission module. B, upload the budget table per work package in Excel. C, both places. Or D, budget information is not required. So you have now a few seconds to reply. Okay. So the correct answer is in both places, both the budget table per cost category and per work package. One in the system and one as an Excel table to be uploaded. And second question, which of these costs are not eligible for CEF Energy? A, VAT, B, land acquisition, C, indirect costs, D, all of the above. Time for voting. Okay, so if you have listened carefully, you will have heard before that none of these costs is eligible. VAT, land acquisition, indirect costs, they are not eligible for CEF Energy proposals. And so with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you, and I pass it now to my colleague Gauthier, who will present to you information for works proposals specifically, and particularly for the business plan and the business plan spreadsheet that you will use for submitting this data. Gauthier, up to you.
Good morning to everyone. I'm Gauthier Clar. I'm a Senior Manager Financial Engineer at CINEA. And yes, I'm going to take you through the business plan in proposal. What is it? What is it for? And you could use the financial spreadsheet that we have provided. So, yes. First of all, I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues Dorina and Anduela said about the admissibility and the award criteria, but the business plan kicks in various places, quite critically. First, on the impact. As you can see, the impact is also based on the assessment of the commercial viability of the project with regard to upfront cost or the lack of market finance. Moreover, and even more, the business plan kicks in the analysis and the demonstration that the CEF grant will have some stimulating effect. This is what we call the catalytic effect. I have to underpin the first word, to stress the first word, that is a financial gap. Because effectively, as it was said this morning, we look at the financial gap to avoid overfunding, and what we mean by the financial gap is very critical to understand. And that brings me immediately to the next point, that is the last resort principle. So the financial gap is key in this logic of CEF should be the last resort resource to fund the project. The financial gap is not only about the financial NPV. The financial NPV could be described as a financial net present value, financial net present value for the CapEx, capital expenditure, operating revenues, and revenues. But it's also look into other source of income or revenues or resources that you, as applicant, you may collect for the project, such as the CBCA, when there is one, regulatory incentive. I will come back on what it means specifically with respect to tariff and the influence of tariff, but also of other financial instruments, including financing and other grants as well. So it is very important that applicants do understand how the last resort principle operates, because in practice, the financial gap would constitute actually a cap for the grant amount that you may receive under the project, and therefore the financial gap may lead to a reduction in the end of the grant amount. So indeed, this is why we ask for the financial gap to be, let's say, credibly substantiated in your application. With this slide, I want to also tell you a bit transparently about how we are going to use the various information that you will provide, how the evaluators will assess the various pieces of information and what for. So on the top left, you have all the, let's say, relevant pieces of information. And I want to stop here a bit. The business plan. First of all, I think there is a frequently asked question. It has to be a business plan specific for the project, updated business plan. What is a business plan? Basically, what we expect to see in the business plan is basically three things. A description of the business model. What is the service you provide? What is the product you sell? Who are the users? And basically, what's the demand for that? So I insist on the word demand because the business plan should go with a demand analysis demonstrating the market needs. It should also go with a explanation of at which price you expect to sell this product or services. And then you have the business plan per se that goes, of course, again, explaining, let's say, the scope of the project, the CapEx, the OpEx, the revenues, but also the organizational structure that you have in place to implement the project, the commercial contractual arrangement that you have or that you plan. And it's very important that you tell us where you are in terms of finalizing these contractual agreements. I'm thinking of obviously take-or-pay contract or supply agreements for the project that are obviously critical. Don't overload us with a lot of details about minor contract, but we want to see some information about the key contractual agreement in the project. The last bit that we want to see in the business plan is the financing plan, and also telling us, are you going to finance the project? So that's basically, and it's typical of one would expect to find in a business plan. Although we do not provide a template for the business plan, so we're glad to review your template for your business plan. A critical part of the business plan is an Excel model. We, CINEA, have provided a financial spreadsheet that you can find when you go to the submission module. But this financial spreadsheet is not mandatory. But if you do not this one, then you have to provide one of your own. But of course, the recommendation is that you can use, even for reference, the template that we have provided by CINEA. The third source of information is, of course, the application form, section 4 and 5, notably, and also the CBE and CBCA whenever they are relevant. So once the evaluators have reviewed that, then they will look, of course, at the commercial viability for the impact and the catalytic effect. And so they will look at the CapEx, and this is why you need really to explain the CapEx, OpEx, and revenues, the scope of the project. And maybe a word about the revenues. If regulated, you need to tell us what would be the impact on tariff. Is it proportionate? Because the evaluators will look at whether the impact on tariff is proportionate. They will look at macroeconomics in the, let's say, relevant geographic area for the project to see the impact of the project with CEF or without CEF on the tariff. Once the evaluators have actually determined the funding gap at this stage, we will also pay attention. They will be also paying attention to the permanence of the funding gap after the other source of funding. And this is a simple, let's say, follow-up of the principle of last resort, CEF being last resort. So please explain, what sort of other financing you obtain from benefiting member state, other grants, and of course, if you see some, let's say, constraint or flexibility in terms of getting extra financing from lenders or equity financiers. Based on that, the evaluators will estimate the catalytic effect of the CEF grant in two ways. First of all, is there a funding gap that is worse to be compensated with a CEF grant? And also, what is the traction effect of the CEF grant on other financing? Because we were aware that, of course, it might be a bit of a chicken and egg, so we want to understand what actually is the triggering effect, stimulating effect, not only addressing the funding gap, but also bringing other financiers in the project. The last bit, and as I said earlier, evaluators will apply objective factors to determine the appropriate funding rate for the purpose I've mentioned before. I want to stop here because in your projects, some are regulated, and this is why we, as I said, again, principle of last resort, we need to understand what is the impact of the CEF on the tariff, and if it's possible for the project developer, for the applicant, to make best use of tariff to, let's say, to reduce the financial gap. you should know that, of course, this slide will be obvious for owners or applicant in charge of regulated project, may not be obvious for everyone. So the capex of the project will fill into the regulated asset base of that is relevant for the applicant, yes, will actually influence the allowed revenue that the applicant may extract from the project. It will influence the depreciation, the return, and the OPEX as well. And then once the regulated asset base has been determined with the project, once the allowed revenues have been calculated, then dividing by demand, it will be possible to extract a tariff. So to understand the influence of the CEF grant and to what extent your project is subject to tariff and have flexibility to get funding from regulatory incentive like tariff, we need to see, of course, how the regulated asset base is calculated, meaning that we need to understand what is the weighted average cost of capital, so-called the COAC, and the tariff before the investment and after. And this is why we have developed this tab in the financial spreadsheet provided by CINEA. It's also because in some cases, as explained here, the revenues will depend on the CEF or whether the CEF is attributed or not. But even though, as I said, the financial spreadsheet of CINEA is recommended, but not mandatory. But even though you use your model, and even though you provide an Excel spreadsheet on your own, then of course we want to see, we want to be in a capacity to see the impact on tariff, to have a better understanding of the tariff without the project, without CEF, and after CEF. So this is why it's quite important to understand this aspect of the last resort principle. I have a few slides next to detail the financial spreadsheet that CINEA has come out with. So you will find it in the submission module. I'm not going to go through this Excel, but as you should know that it's fairly simple. So it goes with a number of tabs. Notice tab, it's quite important to read the notice tab. This is where you will find most explanations about what to do, what not to do. And then most of the input will be, as name suggests, the input sheet. Then we have this regulated asset-based spreadsheet. And then I will tell you what we do with this in the financial analysis. Also note that you can use the free tabs 1 and 2, where you can do your own calculation. And of course, you can link those two calculations into the input sheet as you feel appropriate. This is also where you can use the free tabs to connect to your own spreadsheet, or actually pasting your own spreadsheet, your own Excel spreadsheet into the free tabs to provide additional explanation that would not necessarily fit in the input sheet simply. So feel free to use and maybe abuse these free tabs to provide more information about the formulas that you use and the main parameters. On this first page, I can only point to some critical, let's say, parameters. The financial rate of discount rate. You will find again explanation about what is it. Then it shows 5%, but you should feel free to change it using, for example, WACC. But as long as you provide a valid justification and explanation as your weighted average cost is determined. Another key, let's say, significant parameter is the reference period of the project. It includes obviously the operational phase of the project. You can find reference. This also you have to explain There is abundant literature for, also in CBA guides and so forth, to determine the reference period. A reference period will be obviously important to determine the lifespan and of your projections, financial projections, but also it will have an influence on the replacement cost. If you have a long reference period, please do not forget to include replacement cost. Infrastructure, you need to replace sometimes some bits, and also it has some influence on the residual value at the end, if any, of the project. Yes, I think that we can skip to the next. Can I do this? Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit tiny, but again, you can. And my recommendation is obviously to go in the submission model to open this spreadsheet to have a better understanding. Here, as you may expect, this is input sheet, so I'm not coming back again on the investment size in your investment section that contains the replacement cost and residual value. But in terms of operating costs, one thing is that you need to provide not only the volumes but also the unit, because don't come on board us with a raw figures with operating cost. To the extent possible, try to express it as based on volumes and unit cost. Same applies to the revenues, or even more important. We want to see the price that you have used, and of course use the application form and the business plan to provide additional details about the projection for prices, and same applies to the projection for quantities. And here, if you're going to detail, I'm not going to do that now, but based on the principle that I've explained for TAB, the revenues may vary if you based upon the amount of CEF that you will request. The final box bottom is about the financing plan, and here do not forget to include all grants that you have obtained or that are already confirmed, and you can do that injecting this amount of grants and other fundings into at least at the year of entry into operation. With this, I want also to tell you what we do with that. So again, for transparency, basically we calculate the funding gap, which is a financial net present value, and we look at also the financial rate of return of the project without CEF, and this will be key for you to justify that your project needs some funding. And we also use that to be transparent, not only to look at the sustainability of the project, i.e. the capacity to withstand shortfall of cash flows and these kind of things, but also to understand the profitability also after CEF. So I think we are quite transparent about how the evaluators is going to use this tab. And you will find it, so you can have a look at the formula and so to better understand what you need to provide in your application. Quickly about this is the regulated asset base tab. So this is where you can explain are the CEF. First of all, what is a regulated asset base at the moment without a project, then with a project, and how the let's say regulated revenues are going to be calculated and or paid by users through a regulated tariff. There is a frequently asked question about that, but if you click yes, then you see the various steps that you want to explain. Here, we have obviously not provided the model for calculated RAB because it's country specific as well, so we cannot do that. So feel free to use to use your own calculation, inserting figures with formulas as well. Again, don't bombard us with, let's say, hard-coded figure that won't serve any purpose on our side. But at least it shows you the various steps. And I have well, this is not obviously the final step, but yes, the final slide is actually this one. A few tips about credibility. As I think that it's very clear that it's obviously the applicant interest to be as transparent and credible possible, and it's really its interest to maximize its chances to get the requested amount of grant because of the influence of the financial gap. So a few tips to build credibility here. You can build credibility, ensuring consistency in between various supporting documents, avoiding repetition. Repetition doesn't, sorry to say, but repetition doesn't add credibility. In some cases, quite the contrary, because it shows that you're a bit dry on the subject. So please avoid repetition, but provide us, facts and consistency across the various documents, the business plan, again, and the application form, and obviously the financial spreadsheet. Make use of free tabs, as I explained. In addition, not in substitution. Yes, bear in mind that the financial template is not in substitution of the financing plan. This is quite clear in a frequently asked question. So you need to provide the business plan. Sorry, you need to provide the business plan. This is a mandatory piece of information, and the financial templates comes with it. Again, don't provide us with hard-coded figures, but explain. Use the input sheet and the comment box when you want to share with us some explanations. And yes, again, please provide with formulas. Explain your business model, the scope of the project, and the major commercial and financial obstacle. You can do that in the application form and the business plan. Again, something that is really helpful also for you is to provide a one-page diagram of key stakeholders, naming contractual agreements. This is very important, suppliers, client, and highlighting with some arrows, if you like, the cash in and cash out of the financing structure. Again, credibility you can build, providing justification of key business assumptions, and not to repeat the WACC, but of course the capex. Are there any benchmark for this capex? Type of contract, EPC, and provide a letter of intent. Sorry, LOI stands for letter of intent from suppliers. Same for operating expenses. Point 4 is also very important. Provide details again about the underlying agreement, the take-or-pay contract, supply, commercial agreement for supply. Indicate if it's fixed or variable, and these kind of things, if it's committing or not. And for revenues, again, I have to insist on the demand analysis. We need to understand what's the expectation from users, and that will take form if there are PPAs or open season, or these kind of things. And for the financing, the last point maybe, because I'm running short of time, you can explain the nature of financing. You can explain the constraint that you encountered into maximizing the amount of financing, debt or equity. And for this, you can also provide letter of support of LOI, but as long as they demonstrate due diligence. So LOI is good for demonstrating the financial maturity, but in that case, what is really, let's say, important, that it's not like a boilerplate LOI, but it also demonstrates some due diligence. Otherwise, the value in terms of building credibility is limited. And that was my final slide about the business plan. So I hope that it was comprehensive. So good luck. And my next and final recommendation is that you open the submission module and you have your financial project finance specialist involved in the process to review all this financial, commercial information that you're going to provide. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gauthier. Very detailed and very pertinent recommendations. So with this, we have concluded the presentations for today. I remind you that you have also a recording, a video of how you have to submit the proposal in the submission module in eGrants. This recording is available on the page of the event on our website. And before moving on to the last part, which is the Q&As, I would also like to remind all participants that we have a survey on the event, also on Slido. So please, before closing the session, get into this feedback survey because it's very useful for us. Send to us feedback on how you assess this event, any things that were particularly well or that you would like to see different in previous occasions. And we're always aiming to improve and get better over time. So please fill out this survey before disconnecting today. And now we can move on to the final point of the agenda, which is Q&A. So we have received a number of questions on Slido. If I count correctly, it's nearly 25 questions, some of them related, others on different topics. But we're going to try to cover them all now orally. And in any case, later on, these questions may also be replied in writing if they are not already covered by the existing Q&As for the calls. So please check first in the Q&A for the two topics if the question is already answered there. And if in the case that is not answered there, then we may publish new Q&As after this session. And so we start with the first one. I read aloud. The portal allows more information to be transmitted than is necessary for studies. Does this influence the evaluation? So I would like to invite this participant and all others to submit only what is necessary for the type of application they're preparing. Of course, for works, there are additional questions in the application forms. There are additional mandatory documents that you need to submit than for studies. So this is normal. An application for works takes more work, and also we need more information and experts need more information to evaluate it. So I would invite you to stick exclusively to what is required to you. So if you're preparing an application for studies, please only reply the questions that are applicable for studies, and those that are applicable for works, you are not expected to reply to those questions. You're not expected to submit more information than that. Same with the documents. If the documents are not mandatory, not required for your proposal, like in particular for studies, documents that are not required, like CBA, like business plan, all the documents, please do not submit them because they are not expected to be received from you. We can go to the next question. Assuming a project whose studies activities will start from end 2026, early 2027, do you think that applying to CEF 2025 call would be premature? Well, here, as you heard before, one of the award criteria for evaluation is maturity. So you need to assess whether the proposed project for which you're requesting funding is sufficiently mature to be submitted in this year's call. And then again here, it depends whether it's studies or works. You may consider that for studies, you would need to be ready to start the main activities quite soon in the coming months after submission, while for works, the main activities and in particular construction could start later. So depending on whether it's studies or works, the maturity is assessed in a little bit different way, but basically it's up to you to determine whether in this year's call your project is sufficiently mature. So please pay attention to the guidance that we're providing to assess the maturity criterion in the presentation that was done before my colleague Anduela, but also in the call documents. And then it's up to you to consider whether it's sufficiently mature or not. So if the project starts end 26, early 27, if it studies, well, that is an indication of low level of maturity. If it's works, then you have to assess when are the main activities starting. And that will determine whether the proposal for works could be considered still mature or not. So it's up to you, but these are some general principles for your consideration. Next question, is the creation of CO2 neutral heat network eligible for this call? The answer is no. There is no project in the PCI PMI list that it's about heat networks. So this call for proposals is not for this kind of projects. Okay, there are some questions related to the list of responsible national authorities. So maybe I can pass these questions to my colleague Frank.
Thank you, Juan. Good afternoon to all participants. I'm Frank Hesler, working in DG Energy in the infrastructure unit and also collaborating to this call. So indeed, let me maybe set out first what this requirement is for everyone. We have, of course, always had for regulated electricity and natural gas projects the requirement to submit a cross-border cost allocation decision from the relevant national regulatory authorities. And since the revision of the 10E regulation, we have a new requirement which applies in a similar fashion to smart grid projects, CO2 projects, and by analogy also non-regulated electricity storage projects. And this requirement is that these projects, when applying for CEF, they should submit an evaluation by the relevant national authority or, if applicable, the NRA, so the national regulator. And this evaluation is about two elements. First, the national authority should evaluate and confirm that the project has significant externalities. And second, the evaluation should confirm that the project lacks commercial viability and thus needs CEF. So this is a new requirement that applied first time last year in the 2024 call. It still applies with no changes on the substance of this requirement in terms of the content. As regards who the national authority is, this is not specified by the 10E regulation. It's a matter to decide for national authorities, for the member states. It will depend in each member state which national authority is in charge of smart grids or of CO2 networks or of the non-regulated electricity storage, which we also submit to this requirement because they can not receive a CBCA from national regulators typically. We have reached out to national governments and have made them aware of this requirement. And as we indicated in Slido, we have already a list of those authorities that have been communicated to us by member states as the relevant national authorities. Other member states have not done so. We will on our side reach out again to member states, but I would recommend that all applicants who are concerned by this requirement concern their national ministries, their national regulators to clarify who the authority is. And as regards Spain specifically, we are aware that in the last year, in the call for 2024, the Spanish Ministry for Energy actually submitted this type of evaluation for some of the projects. So maybe for the applicant who asked specifically about Spain, we would also recommend that they get back to the national ministry. But again, we will reach out again to member states about this to remind them that this requirement is in the 10E and that they should designate a national authority to do this.
Thank you, Frank. Next question. How can a beneficiary prove the benefits of implementing a PCI for at least one of the member states that the consortium is made of? Maybe here I would refer again to Frank from the
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. The question is not entirely clear to me what is meant by the applicant. It may be worthwhile coming back to us through the functional mailbox by sending an email, sending the question in. In general, the benefits are established by the cost-benefit analysis, which is already submitted to receive the PCI status and which is also part of submitting, which also needs to be submitted as part of the CEF proposal. So I think I would recommend checking the CBA first. And if there are any more specific questions about that, then please get back to us by writing to the mailbox. Thanks.
Yeah, many thanks. Is it sufficient to share the decision of the regulators approving the CBCA? Is it correct to attach the specific document supporting the submitted CBCA? So for those project categories where a CBCA decision is required, yes, you have to submit as part of the application the decision itself, the decision by regulators concerned by the cost allocation of the project. So it is correct indeed to attach the specific document, the decision by regulators, to the application. Please make a distinction between the decision by the regulators, the CBCA decision, and the CBCA proposal or investment request that has been submitted by the promoters, by the applicants, to the regulators. That is not the document we require. We require the decision itself by regulators, or if it's the case that they don't agree, by ACER on the project. That is the document that we require, the CBCA decision by regulators or ACER. Next question, is it possible to apply for works if the results of the public consultation are yet to come? So for works proposals, you have to include as part of your application all the preceding steps that have been already achieved for your project as part of the data that you submit to us to assess the maturity. So it's up to you to consider whether your proposal is sufficiently mature if the public consultation has not yet been done. But in principle, there is no rule that prevents you from applying to works, even if the public consultation is not yet concluded or the final results are not yet completed. So it's not a requirement. You can apply for works, but then be aware that the assessment of the maturity criterion will look at this, how mature the entire project is and the proposed activities are to be funded in this year's scope. Okay, so next question, are the declarations by the competent authority in the environmental compliance form necessary if EIA and permits have yet to be conducted for studies topic? So I would remind first that for studies, if it's a study without physical interventions, you need to submit the form, the environmental compliance form, but you just need to tick the option study without physical intervention, and then the rest of the document can be just empty. So we need to receive the file, but the file just need to indicate that you have no physical intervention. If it's a study with physical interventions, then yes, you need to reply to all the questions and you need to attach to the form all the documents that prove the information that you're including in your answers. So there are questions about the applicability of the directives, the EIA directive, Water Framework Directive, Natura 2000, and then for some of these directives, you will need to show the declaration from the competent authority proving that, for example, the project is not submitted to Water Framework Directive assessment or Natura 2000, there is no impact. So these kind of declarations, yes, you have to submit them attached to the environmental compliance form. And the same for works, of course. Next question, can you elaborate on how to explain the impact on tariffs in terms of proportion and macroeconomics in case of regulated market? Gauthier, would you like to take this one?
Can you elaborate on how to explain the impact on tariff in terms of proportion? What I meant with this is that, of course, we try to understand to what extent the project is going to influence the tariff in the market subject, in the relevant market. And for this, we look at the macroeconomics before the project, after the project, in terms of where are the tariffs in these countries. This is what is meant by macroeconomics. And we want to estimate whether with regard to proportion, we want to estimate whether the project will have a significant impact for the users paying tariff or not, and what is this impact like? Is it only a couple of basis points of percentages, or is it more than that? And of course, this level is not only a question about basis points or percentage, but it's also relative to the existing level of the tariff in the country. This is what is meant by proportion and macroeconomics.
Very well, thank you. Is there a repayment obligation if a preliminary project for a power line, for example, studies, I guess it says, can be realized, construction, after the evaluation phase is finalized. So first of all, the evaluation of the proposal will lead to two outcomes. One, that is recommended for funding. Two, not recommended for funding. If it's not recommended for funding, there is no selection of the project, no grant agreement, no funding. In the case that it's selected for funding, then it would be recommended by the Commission to the CEF committee with member states, and then we will prepare grant agreements for this project. As part of the grant agreements, there are several payments that can be done to a project, and the first one is a pre-financing payment under certain conditions. And so a situation where a project is running, there is an ongoing grant agreement, and a payment has been made, for example, pre-financing or pre-financing and interim payments, and finally the project is not implemented, then it may be that there is an obligation to repay, or in our language, a recovery of part of the money that has been paid. This depends on whether the completion is just null, is zero. In that case, all the money paid needs to be recovered and the project is terminated, or if only part of the project has been implemented, there is partial implementation and maybe still some costs are eligible, so then depending on what has been paid and what is finally found eligible to be paid, there might be a repayment or not. So basically it depends on, first of all, whether your project has already signed a grant agreement and has already received payments, and then what is the state of play later. Is it fully completed, is it partially completed, or is it not completed at all? And then there might be different situations for repayment, depending on the case. So in case of application for grant for studies, is it mandatory to submit a business plan? No, it's not mandatory, as we already explained before. Are costs related towards the development and investment in ammonia crackers eligible? So these costs can be eligible, provided that the ammonia cracker is part of the scope of an existing PCI or PMI. So you need to double check that the scope of the project includes this element, and then if it includes it, yes, this type of infrastructure can be funded for studies or for works. Can costs, fees charged by public authorities to obtain the necessary permits to implement the project be considered eligible? If yes, under which cost category? So there is actually a Q&A already published on the Funding and Tenders portal, where we confirm that this kind of cost can be eligible. So administrative fees that are necessary to implement the project can be covered. And they should also be ideally defined in the grant agreement, in the description of the project, already considering the budget. And you should include it under budget category C3, costs of other goods, works and services, in the table per cost category. If the project is currently not regulated but expected to be regulated when operational, should the financial model be built according to RAB model? And here I would turn again to my colleague Gauthier.
I would say so, yes. I can repeat the question, of course. If the project is currently not regulated, but expected to be regulated when operational, should the financial model be built according to RAB model? Yes, because we look for the economic substance. So that would be my take on that.
Great, thank you. Next question, is presenting subset of infrastructures, for example, CO2 hub without compression, increasing the impact of the funding on the overall budget presented, considered a plus? I have to say that this question is not very clear to me, but if I understand that it means that so a certain set of infrastructures presented in the proposal, it talks about a CO2 hub, which could be a CO2 collection infrastructure or a different kind of infrastructure. If it increases the impact of the funding on the overall budget presented, consider a plus. Well, just first of all, in case it refers to whether a higher co-funding rate can be achieved, the answer is no. So it does not make a difference. The co-funding rate is not depending on the type of infrastructures or elements that are included in the proposal. Now, if these elements included in the project increase the impact of the project as such, and the impact of the project for works proposals includes several considerations, includes the externalities, includes the climate and mitigation impact, includes also the financial impact, then these elements, if they make the impact higher, then you could consider that they could help the project to get a better score in the criteria award. So in that sense, maybe including the elements could contribute to having a better chance to get funding. That's all I could say, but I would turn to my colleagues if they want to complement. Otherwise, this is the answer we can give with this formulation. Another question on an ammonia cracker. Is an investment of an ammonia cracker located in a port as part of a cross-border hydrogen supply chain eligible under 10E? Yes, provided that it's in the scope of the PCI or PMI where to which the proposal relates to. Is drilling a CO2 injection well considered under study with physical intervention or works? So there are several questions related to CO2 drilling, and we're going to try to clarify what is the eligibility or non-eligibility for this kind of activities. First of all, I would like to remind that for CO2 projects, there are only certain types of assets that are eligible for CEF Energy, and these are established in Annex 2 of the 10A regulation. I invite applicants to consult that. Okay, yes, they're all related, so we are showing several questions which are related to the same topic. CO2 storages as such, CO2 storage facilities, underground storage facilities, these are not eligible for CEF Energy. Only injection and surface facilities can be eligible. Injection and surface, but nothing subsurface, nothing underground. So this said, basically proposals that submit activities including drilling for works to construct, to develop an underground storage for CO2, these activities are not eligible and will be excluded during evaluation. Now, if it's a proposal for a study and the study is aiming to carry out, for example, feasibility studies or engineering studies to analyze the possibility to store CO2 in a storage location, and this entails some physical interventions such as extracting samples, drilling to perform tests, to extract the subsurface material and analyze the feasibility, but is not the construction of an underground storage as such, then those type of activities could be eligible for studies. It would be a study with physical intervention, and you would need to explain how these activities are necessary to conclude the results of the study. The results of the study would be typically reports, technical documents that prove or that show the results of the studies analyzed, but the result of the study as such is not the construction of a well. So I hope this clarifies the questions which we've seen. So here we're talking about the drilling activity as such. So in a works proposal, no, it's not eligible. In a study proposal, it depends. Case by case, it can be assessed. If it helps to achieve the results of the study as physical intervention, it could be considered in the activities. I also replied to the last one in this slide, injection facilities associated with infrastructure, if they are eligible or not. So only injection and service are eligible. And the second question, non-compliance with national legislation which regulates that the well project also describes the commissioning, the deliverable is a well or a drilling report. So it's up to you to determine what is the final outcome of your proposal, what are going to be the deliverables. If the deliverable is a drilling report or a report in general, then the proposal is for a study, because the final outcome of your activities is a report, it's not an infrastructure constructed. If the final deliverable in your project is a well, the construction of a well, then I remind that this is not eligible under CEF Energy. So you should not submit a proposal to construct an underground storage for CO2 because this would not be eligible. I hope this clarifies the question. Feel free to come back to us after the info day to the call help desk if you have follow-up questions on this. So is it possible to add new projects to the list of PCI's PMI's projects that can apply for funding? Which is the procedure? Well, not for this call. This call is based on the first list of the first union list of PCI's PMIs, which was adopted by the end of 2023, published last year in 2024. And this is the list that applies this year. For future lists of PCI's PMIs, there is an ongoing process now for the second PCI PMI list. Maybe I refer to my colleague Frank from ENER on this.
Thank you, Juan. Indeed, there will be a second list of projects of common interest and projects of mutual interest, which is to be published at the end of the year. The process is ongoing, but for that list already it is not possible to apply anymore. So applications for future PCI and PMI status would only be possible as of next year.
Many thanks. If the EIA process is not complete, should the environmental compliance form be provided anyway? Should the declarations from member states attached be signed or works? Yes, you still need to provide the environmental compliance form, regardless of the state of play of the EIA process. You will inform us there where you stand, where your project stands, which environmental authorizations are still pending. And then declarations from member states, if they're already available, yes, you can attach them to the form, and that will also show and prove the state of the project from environmental perspective. Okay, so it seems that we have reached the end of the questions. In any case, feel free to submit if you don't find the answer to your questions in the questions that we have already presented today, in the presentations, in the recording of how to submit a proposal, or in the existing Q&As. In the case that you still don't find the answer to your question there, you can still write to our call help desk. We have an email address available on the page event, the page of the event. We're showing now on screen, so you can still write to us there. And we would publish the answers in an anonymous way, in a general way, for the benefit of all applicants. So please do not submit very specific questions on your proposal, because we cannot provide too specific information or guidance on your specific proposal. And so with this, then I guess we have concluded this info day. So I would like to thank all colleagues that have participated in this session, all the colleagues who have presented, and all the colleagues who have made possible the preparation of this event and the organization of this info day. So thank you very much to all of you. And thank you as well to all the participants online. And just a reminder that the recording of this session will be available soon on our website. You can still consult if you have missed part of the session or you want to come back to presentations. You can always do it there. So thank you very much. Good luck with your proposals, and see you soon. Have a nice day.